Mrs. Miriam Uwais. She is the Special Advisor to the President on Social Investment. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I'm hoping that subsequently we will be able to see the report from the House of Representatives, showing some opposition to how the federal government has proposed to spend the monies returned from the Abacha loot. But what we hear so far is that the federal government proposes to spend that money, giving it to the poor. Is that right?
That's the position, yes.
How precisely is that going to be part of the social investment scheme, or is that a separate program?
Yes, it's the same scheme. It began in December 2016. December 2015. We began disbursing because when this administration came into office, we needed to find a credible way of paying poor people. And we needed a register of the poor and vulnerable. And already under the past administration, there had been 8 states that had entered an agreement directly with the World Bank. And they had a credible register. They had followed the procedure for community-based targeting. And it had been insulated from politics. So we took a look at that register and we cleaned it up and started paying immediately. And since then, we've grown into 20 states. By the end of July, we'll have 33 states that have a social register. So we've been paying, we've paid at least 14 billion to poor people.
How was the decision taken that the monies that are returned from the Abacha loot should go into social investment or should go to the poor, considering the fact that what we've seen also with the National Assembly, and you have appeared before the National Assembly to defend monies that were earmarked to go into social investment programs, they have said, oh, you have asked for a certain amount of money, which they approved, but it was said that only a fraction of that money was spent. Is it that we don't have enough funds? Why precisely is that money going to that program?
Well, we have an overwhelming number of poor people in this country. But that said, the appropriation of 500 billion is not the amount that we've been given for the cash transfers. All in all, this year, we've been given 140 billion for the entire gamut of social investment programs. This includes Empower, the GEEP, the Government Empowerment and Enterprise Program, the school feeding program, and cash transfers.
How much did you ask for?
We have 400 billion that we're meant to get, but you see, it's recurrent. A lot of it is recurrent, and so there are a lot of contending demands on the income that comes in. So the Minister of Finance, the Cash Management Committee, determines what we get every month.
How do you respond to critics who say that, the conditional cash transfer is just a populist move, that it really has no tangible effect on the Nigerian economy, both in the short term, medium term, and long term?
I would encourage them to engage with the people that have so far received this 5,000 naira every month. You see, because of what had happened to the recoveries in the past, there was no accountability in a sense. The Swiss judgment provided a clause that the monies must be monitored by the World Bank. This is not something that the World Bank was privy to. It's not something that Nigeria was privy to. But for the money to come back to Nigeria, there was a clause that it had to be monitored by the World Bank. Now, the World Bank engaged the federal government and said, we didn't ask for this, right? We were not privy to this. If you want us to actually monitor this, you should place it in a program or a project that the World Bank already has an interest in. Because setting up structures specifically for monitoring this disbursement is going to cost us money. So who's going to fund that? Who's ready to fund it? If you put it in any other project that we don't know anything about, it means that we will have to set up the structures on our own. So we were faced with whether we needed to appeal, which would take another how many years, or get and we wouldn't know what the outcome would be, or accept what the World Bank was saying. And of course there were reservations, sovereignty issues, but it's in the judgment. So the World Bank gave us an array of projects that they're involved in. And the federal government in its wisdom said, this money was taken from Nigerians. we have an overwhelming number of poor people. No matter the amount of money we put in it now, I mean, that 400 billion, if it all went to cash transfers, it wouldn't address the extreme poverty that many Nigerians are faced with. So they said to us, you have these structures. And meanwhile, World Bank, of our 4 programs, it is only the cash transfers that the World Bank has lent us money, the IDA credit. So this is how come it ended up being for the cash transfers. And the way we've structured it, it is only going to go for disbursements. And I should say, it's not just money being shared. I think it's unfortunate the word use, I mean the use of the word share, because it's cash transfers. The world over, cash transfers evidently reduce poverty if it's done right. And we also train community facilitators in every ward. And those facilitators actually meet every week with the beneficiaries of the cash transfer. We pay the caregivers in every household that's been found, that's on our register. And they train them financial skills, for forming savings groups, on nutrition, life skills. So there are amazing stories out there. Unfortunately for us, many of our journalists don't go out there to talk to them. They listen, they see the social media, they talk to people in towns. You know, right now we have over 300,000 people that are receiving, almost 300,000 receiving cash transfers.
In fairness to the critics of the program, you have been on public record as saying that there have been issues bordering on corruption in relation to, this program. So how do you assuage the concerns, the fears of those who, when you reported to NEC that these are real issues?
Yeah, what happened at that, it was really, I had to issue a statement after that, because somebody asked me specifically about an issue in one state. And I responded to say, yes, there were issues, but we had nipped it in the bud. And that person, the state official, had been removed. Now, you can't imagine that across the entire country there wouldn't be issues.
Can you give Nigerians insight into what the problem was and how you eventually solved that problem?
It was a school feeding program. It was a school feeding it wasn't the cash transfers. The cash transfers is a very meticulous process, how we select the poor and the vulnerable. And the problem is a lot of our politicians, a lot of the people in town don't know. It's insulated from everybody else. You know, we just go, we look at the poorest local governments, a poverty mapping, and then we venture into those communities. We ask each state to open an office in the Ministry of Planning. And then we train, we ask for the deployment of certain skills to that office. So it's not anybody that would work in that office. We look for advocacy, we look for people who have worked for at least 6 years in the civil service, because we're trying to build capacity, and the register is going to be reviewed after 3 years. We look for survey, we look for gender, and then we train them to go into the communities to define the parameters for poverty in that community.
How do you address issues like nepotism, though? Because, the concerns have been raised about nepotism and about favoritism and about choosing who benefits and how.
So this is what I'm getting to. Mm-hmm. Once the community selects in different groups, women together, men together, so they're comfortable about identifying who is poor, we visit those households one by one. We have a device, an electronic device that has a proxy means testing formula on it. We take down we enter information on different fields. We have enumerators that we've trained. Things like, how many people eat from the same, how many people live in the household, how many wives, how many children, what the educational levels are, provision of water, what the assets are in that household. And you have things like a motorbike, or you have torchlights or kettles. This device has a proxy means testing formula. It automatically ranks everybody that is entered, from the poorest to the least poor. Now there's a threshold there. So even where somebody with a loud voice or very influential in the community says, I need to be on that register, by the time we take the information on the device and the PMT sets in, we exclude those that have motorbikes as against those that have torchlights. And it is only those below the threshold that are paid. So the National Social Register is really big, but the people that are paid are those below the threshold.